right, y'all. I'm back. My name is Lara Williams, and this is Sonographers After Dark. So this is my Thanksgiving edition. It's Black Friday. And so, there's so much to be thankful for. And so I just want to share a couple things about why I'm thankful for what I do and just some gratefulness because it's that season. And so, I think that it's really easy in the careers that we have to kind of lose our humanity sometimes, right? We care for everybody else in our profession. We take time for our patients. We give and we give and we give. And sometimes we don't always take care of ourselves, right? And, I have learned through a lot of trial and error in my life that self-care is really important. There was a point in my life where I almost died. And that really changed my perspective in general about my career, about my family, about my health. Health is the only thing you have. If you don't have that, and I've been going through some pretty significant health challenges even lately. I was diagnosed with pneumonia. I've had some other things going on from that. And just kind of faced a few challenges back to back. And so, it brings me back to that time in my life where I almost died. And so, your health is everything and you have to take care of yourself. And sometimes I think we forget that in the hustle, the bustle of taking care of our families, taking care of our patients, we tend to lose track of taking care of ourselves. Right. So, I'm so grateful for this profession. I think I've shared before about how I kind of got into ultrasound accidentally and, by the grace of God, excuse me, recovering from pneumonia. So, I want to share a little bit about who I am, what I've walked through in my life, because again, I think that we look at people and we think that they have it all together. And I certainly do not. So, I have it together in a lot of ways in business and a lot of areas, but, there are so many challenges that we face. And sometimes we forget that the person next to us who's standing in the room beside us is just trying to hold it all together, right? And sometimes that's not an easy thing to do. The person on stage who has all the credentials and is speaking on a national level, they're facing their own challenges, right? So we all face challenges in life. And sometimes it's easy to look at someone and be like, oh, they have it all figured out, but we don't, right? Life tends to throw curveballs at people sometimes. And I think that, when we face these challenges after challenge after challenge, whether that's a health challenge, a family challenge, whatever that looks like, it makes us stronger as people. It makes us identify with our patients a lot more. But sometimes we can, face the everyday struggles that we face, especially, the sonographers are in the trenches, scanning every day, back-to-back patients and kind of getting their body abused, right? We sometimes forget that we're human and that other side of that. Someone might be showing up to work every day, but facing a divorce, or someone might be showing up to work every day and they've just walked through a tragedy in their life. And I've been there. I've been one of those people. I don't always share a lot of my history because it's challenging sometimes. I don't want anyone to look on me with any pity or, I've walked through a lot of things, difficulties in life that have caused me to be so grateful for where I'm at. And so, I faced a lot of challenges as a teenager before I got into ultrasound because I was stupid. I was stupid. So, I was that typical teenager, thought I knew everything, just had to rebel against everything and everybody in authority, right? Ended up in jail at one point as a teenager. We won't talk about that, but that's my history. That's who I was. I did drugs all the time. I ended up in jail. Like, I was a stupid teenager. And thank God, when I say the grace of God has been on my life, you have no idea. And in this season, I'm going to talk about that because, this is a time to be thankful for what we've walked through. This is Thanksgiving season. And so, I'm grateful for God in my life. That's flat out end of story. Like I said, I could have gone a whole different path. And when I say a whole different path, I could have ended up dead, honestly, just before I even almost died, right? When I almost died, it was from a health challenge. But when I was a teenager, I was just stupid, making really stupid decisions. And so, I look back at that time in my life, like, how did I end up here from that? And so it's funny how, again, the grace of God was on my life. And so, whatever you believe, I believe that you can walk through challenges in your life and even your own stupidity and come out better on the other side. Obviously, at some point, you have to stop the stupid decisions and move forward, which I did. Thank God for my mom's friend who got me into ultrasound, and I never looked back, right? And I'm not the same person I was prior to that at all. I'm completely a different person. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago, let alone that person. So, I think that we all change, we grow with the challenges that we face in life, right? One of the challenges that I have faced in my life is, I shared before that, I had a daughter, and part of the reason I got into ultrasound was because I had a daughter who, I found myself pregnant at 19 and needed to figure out what to do to support myself. My parents were great. They did support me going through ultrasound school. But I needed to figure something out pretty quickly. And so that's how I ended up in ultrasound. And I have shared before that daughter passed away. Her birthday was yesterday. So she was born on Thanksgiving Day. She's a Thanksgiving baby. And, that's a joy in my life, but it's also a heartbreak in my life because she lived for about 10 days and then passed away. And so, that was a really challenging thing to walk through, but I've walked through that more than once in my life. And so, again, we look at people who are just kind of showing up and they're scanning and we don't know what they're facing, right? Fast forward, I had another daughter that passed away. So in 2009, I owned my own business at this point. I was growing my empire, and my husband and I at the time were, having this baby, and I scanned myself and realized it was not good. So at 16 weeks, I grabbed one of my ultrasound machines, put the probe down, and was like, my heart sank because I knew. And so there were a lot of issues there, Danny Walker malformation, other issues from Cyronemelia. So yeah, I chose to have that baby. I ended up on bed rest for 7 weeks and with a C-section. It was a choice I made just because I wanted to give her every chance at life, even though I knew that most likely her life would not be, compatible with true life. And so, but I gave her that chance, and that's what I needed to do for me. And I don't regret any moment of that. Spending 7 weeks on bed rest when you're trying to run a company is extremely difficult. And then I had to show up. I had to show up in my company. I had to go scan neonates, right? I was scanning pediatric echo. We had contracts with hospitals. So I'm scanning babies, newborns, after my newborn just passed away. And that was really hard for me. That was a challenging time in my life where emotionally I had to pull it together, and I had to show up for my patients, regardless of everything I had just walked through, regardless of the fact that I had just buried my daughter. I had to show up. And I think sometimes that we forget that the people beside us sometimes just have to show up. And so, we don't know necessarily what everybody's walking through. I didn't tell everybody at that moment. Yes, there were people in my company because they were, they covered for me when I was on bed rest and all of these things. They knew what happened, but I didn't tell all of my clients what happened. I didn't tell all of my customers at that point in time, what was going on. They didn't know. So here I am. I'm just showing up, scanning newborn babies just a couple of weeks after my daughter passed away, and again, I think that we have to bring that humanity piece back in where, it's so easy to get frustrated with our day to day because we are abused, right? Sonographers are abused sometimes by just, all the patient load. We have so much patient load now than we did when I was scanning every day, right? And so the burden on sonographers is much greater than it used to be. But there are tools like AI, which, we've talked about before, that can kind of help that a little bit. But in the end, you're showing up every day to work and you have someone beside you who might not be having a good day and you don't know why. So just remember that everybody's walking through something and they're trying to show up as their best self in the moment of whatever's going on. I walked through a really hard divorce. I mean, it was a difficult, challenging time in my life, and I had to show up. I had to show up for my patients. I had to show up for my business and my career at that point in time. And it's not always easy to do when you're walking through these emotional moments of your own, and you have to be present, and you have to show empathy, and you have to not break down in the middle of what you do. And sometimes that's hard, you know. I think that it's really easy to get a little jaded. So I just kind of want to bring that conversation back around to the things that I'm grateful for in my career, the things that I'm grateful for in life in general. You know, I have a family, I have great husband, and my son, my stepdaughter. My life doesn't look the same as it did before, and I've learned not to completely consume myself with work, which was a challenge for me. So things I've learned along the way, I'm grateful for that, learning by my mistakes. We all do that. I've had some really great mentors in my business life as well as in ultrasound. I've learned that getting a mentor is probably the best thing you can do, whether that's for business, whether that's for ultrasound, whatever that looks like in your life, relationships. Having a mentor, that's a mentality that when I was running my own business, it was so easy to focus on the day to day and get lost in the big picture gets lost a little bit. So I hired a mentor to mentor me in business development, to mentor me in a lot of areas that I was weak in because I didn't know better. I was this stenographer who had a very entrepreneurial spirit and started a business, but I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to file the correct paperwork. I didn't know how to keep track of everything that I needed to keep track of because I had an S Corp and I didn't know all the documentation that you had to keep for an S Corp. So, all of these different things that I had no idea. So I hired a business mentor to walk me through some of these things that I was just far beyond my capacity, right? And so I'm thankful for those mentors. And some of them have been mentors that just came alongside me. Others have been mentors that I hired, right? And I'm still thankful for them too. Every penny was worth it, right? I had the privilege when I went to ultrasound school. I went to general ultrasound school, and I learned general ultrasound in school, and then cross trained into vascular and cardiac along the way. But my teacher in general ultrasound school was Charlotte Henningsen, right? I went to an amazing school, Florida Hospital College of Health Sciences, before it was Adventist Health. And, Charlotte's one of the greats in the field. This was before she wrote her textbook. She was actively writing her textbook at the time. She hadn't become the SDMS president yet at that point in time. And so, yeah, I was able to have mentorship, direct hands-on mentorship from one of the greats in the field. And I think that significantly put my path on a trajectory of just being really capable in ultrasound, right? Because I had the greatest teachers. And so, I think that we underestimate the influence that great teachers have on our lives. And so if you don't know something, if you are, unsure about, exams, whatever, find someone who knows that can teach you. I offer that, but maybe find someone in your hospital who's really an expert at one exam and just study them, right? Watch what they do, learn from them. I think that sometimes we forget to soak in and be a sponge of learning. And that's one thing I've always tried to do in my life, is to learn from everything that I do, everything that I have failed in, right? If I fail something, if I screw something up, I'm going to learn from that and I'm going to take that forward. And so, I'm just grateful for the people that have crossed my path in ultrasound. And, I've worked along some amazing people. I've had the opportunity to work with really great physicians along the way, mentors, and just sonographers who have mentored me as well. And I find that to be something that is invaluable. You can never underestimate the impact that a mentor can have in your life. And so I encourage you, whether that is for business, if you're going into business, I help with that, by the way. I am now a mentor because I've learned some things along the way, right? I've done this for, decades, and I understand how to fail and how to not fail, right? And so why wouldn't you hire someone to help you skip all the hurdles that you don't have to learn yourself? You don't have to learn the hard way. You can skip some of that if you hire a mentor. And so that's really, for me, things that have catapulted my life that I'm grateful for. And another thing that I learned, so my business mentor taught me to keep a gratefulness journal, right? A gratitude journal. What are you grateful for? And so if you just write down 2 or 3 things every day that you're grateful for, you will see your perspective shift and change, right? So, it is really easy to get caught up in the aspects of life that are hard. And I have learned in life that what you focus on, you get more of, right? And so if you're focusing on the stress of the day, if you're focusing on what didn't go your way that day, if you're focusing on the mess of a department that you're working for, or whatever that looks like, right? I think that, again, it is really, really easy to get caught up in all the negative things that take place in your day. But if you can, at the end of your day, sit down before you go to bed and just write 2 or 3 things that you're grateful for that happened that day, or change that you've seen, things that you're growing in, whatever that looks like, 2 or 3 positive things in your day, that can shift your whole attitude in life. Right. And so you will get a whole lot further in your career. You will get a whole lot further in relationships if you're grateful, if you have an attitude of gratefulness. So that's what I wanted to talk about in this season, in this moment being, the Thanksgiving season. We're all, I'm sure, about to go, be around family that sometimes is probably challenging to be around sometimes, right? I love my family. There are family members that are easier to be around than others. That's just the truth of probably every family. But, again, if we can find some things to be grateful for in the middle of that, then it shifts our attitude. And then, that changes who we are. It shows in our attitude. It shows in our demeanor, our countenance. Everything changes when you have a different approach. And so I encourage you to not get caught up in the things that are hard, the things that are difficult in your day, or the things that are difficult in your job. And yes, we all encounter them, and there's things that you do have to address if it's, significant. But, in the middle of the drama, just take a step back. Really consider a few things that you can be grateful for. And even if it's just, hey, I had a beautiful pancreas on my image today, right? Hey, that's something to be grateful for. And so it's the little things that matter. And so you did your best for that patient. That's something that you can be grateful for as well. And so I just encourage you to, keep track of that. You'll see yourself grow, and you'll see, it's so easy sometimes in some departments, not all. There are some work environments that are wonderful and amazing and don't have a culture of drama and don't have a culture of gossip. But there are some departments that are completely cultures of gossip. And sometimes you have to change that in you, right? You have to be the one to walk away and say, nope, we're not going to do this today. Today is not going to go this way. So, those environments only persist if you allow them. And so sometimes it's a matter of learning how to shift those conversations. But I think that if you can find that gratefulness and that gratitude in yourself, then you won't really entertain any other type of demeanor. And so, just something to think about. I think that because we are so overworked, and because, there's a lot of stress going on, and I think that there's such a heavy workload and expectation on sonographers that it is so easy to just get caught up in that drama of complaining about the day, or complaining about the patient, or the radiologist, or the cardiologist, or whatever that looks like. But, if you can find yourself in a place where you can just be grateful, it'll change everything for you. I promise. It has for me. So, I used to be not a nice person. I was not a nice person. Prior to that, I could be very difficult to deal with. And so I think that, this type of exercise for me changed my whole demeanor and how I can be more approachable to people. I was not a very approachable person before. And so I've learned to become that. And that has changed my business life as well. So what I do, I do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of consulting for education. I do consulting for business startups. I do consulting on a number of different levels, accreditation, IDTF, Medicare enrollment, provider enrollment, all of those things. So I do a lot of aspects of just working with clients and working with people. And so, when I have to work with customers on a high level, I'm working with very high level executives and high level administration in hospitals and those types of environments, you can't go in there with an attitude. You can't, right? So, and these are things I've learned along the way in my career through industry as well as my own business. And, you have to be what my mom's favorite word, magnanimous, right? That magnanimous approach where you are pleasant and you are cordial and, it's not fake, right? I'm not fake. I'm not a fake person. I'm going to be me, whether I am in front of, the president of the ASE or the president of wherever, or whether I'm, with a brand new sonographer coming out of school or a student, I'm going to be myself because that's who I am. You have to be authentic. So, you have this balance of being authentically you, but also being able to approach every situation with a different perspective and seeing it from the side of the other person as well. So, so that's kind of me in a nutshell, some of the things I've walked through in my time and in my life. And it has caused me to show up every day being grateful for what I do, the opportunities that I've had, and the world around me. And so I hope that you are grateful as well. Tell me in the comments a few things that you're grateful for. Maybe it is that pancreas picture that you got the other day on this, difficult patient or whatever that might be. So tell me what you're grateful for. Hopefully it's a lot more than that, but that's a start. So, and I am also grateful for you. So thank you for listening. One of the things I want to share, as you all know by now, I have allaboutultrasound.com and iheartecho.com, and we've got some merch going on. We have some CME courses, registry review. So if you type in thankful, you will get 25% off anything on the website. Good through Cyber Monday. So keep that in mind. December 1st, the end of the day, that code is done. So take advantage of it now. Anything on the website, except for our live courses, can't discount those. But everything else, 25% off, you've got it. So go ahead and jump in, and I will see you next time on Sonographers After Dark.